Films are made up of sequences. Sequences are made up of scenes. And scenes are made up of shots. In previous episodes, we covered editing transitions, composition, and lighting fundamentals. Today, we'll focus on cinematic lighting and different ways to light subjects and their surroundings.
Lights up.
This is episode 13 of The Shot List. Cinematic Lighting, Part 2. Hit subscribe and enable notifications to get all future episodes of The Shot List. At the end of the video, we'll explain how to download our free ebook on cinematic lighting. In Part 1, we laid out the fundamentals of cinematic lighting, including the types of light, the qualities of light, essential terminology, and the most commonly used equipment when lighting a scene. In Part 2, we'll provide a step-by-step guide to lighting a scene, starting with the various styles and lighting setups for a subject. There are many ways to light a subject. It all comes down to intention. How is the subject feeling? What do we want the audience to understand about this character at this moment? This intention will guide your lighting choices. And while there are countless ways to light a subject, let's discuss the most popular methods. Arguably, the most common way to light a subject is with three-point lighting, which has three light sources directed at the subject: a key light, fill light, and backlight. The key light is the primary and strongest light. The fill light fills in the shadows created by the key light. The final light in the three-point setup is the backlight. This light is directed at the subject from behind and creates a rim of light around the subject's edges, separating them from the background. The fill light is usually less strong and more diffused. To create a low-key image, the fill light will be very dim, or even non-existent. For a high-key or low-contrast image, the fill will be closer in strength to the key light. Negative fill is the process of blocking any unwanted fill light to increase the contrast. The difference between the fill and the key will affect the contrast ratio, which refers to the difference between light and shadow in an image. This allows for a fill to influence the mood of a scene. Types of backlights include edge lights or kickers that focus on a particular area of the subject. And hair lights are usually angled down onto the subject's head to create highlights in the hair. Catch lights, sometimes called eye lights, are the tiny reflections of a light source in the eyes, which help give them some life and depth. In this scene from the Grand Budapest Hotel, Wes Anderson and cinematographer Robert Yeoman employ a large key light hanging over the two subjects, and some backlight provided by distant practicals. Using a diffused key light along with multiple dim backlights creates a high-key image with soft lighting.
Well, it begins, as it must, with our mutual friend's predecessor.
But the lighting on Mr. Mustafa changes, signaling a shift in the story.
The beloved original concierge of the Grand Budapest. It begins, of course, with...
The key light dims down, and now the fill light becomes the key. Behind Mr. Mustafa, a hair light brightens, perhaps motivated by the practicals on the wall. The various combinations and arrangements of these lights create commonly used subject lighting setups. Rembrandt lighting can be achieved through a three-point setup, placing the key light slightly higher and dimming the fill light, creating a signature triangle of light on the darker side of the subject's face, named after the light Rembrandt used on his subjects. Butterfly lighting, also known as paramount lighting, uses only two lights, featuring a key light that is placed directly in front of the subject at a high angle. It creates a butterfly-shaped shadow under a subject's nose and is often used for glamorous shots, highlighting cheekbones and smoothing out imperfections. Loop lighting is a similar approach, but the light is set at a 45-degree angle from the subject's face and placed just above their eye line. Loop lighting can appear to lengthen the face of a subject, so it's often used on actors with oval-shaped faces. There's also split lighting, which refers to a key light hitting half of a subject with no fill light, creating a dramatic image, often building a feeling of ominous mystery. There is also overhead and underlighting. Overhead or top lighting positions the light over the head of the actor, which can be used to obscure the eyes.
Now, behold how swiftly your brother swings his sword.
And underlighting places the light under the subject. Underlighting can be seen in classic horror films because of the unnatural-looking shadows on the face. Both approaches create distinguished shadows and can emphasize the bone structure of a subject's face.
Well, you have actually excellent bone structure there. I'm kind of having a hard time not looking at you now. Is that weird?
But of course, some of your shots might contain multiple subjects. When shooting more than one character, a cinematographer needs to consider where our attention needs to be directed. Are all the subjects equally important? Or are one or two meant to stand out?
Welcome, James. It's been a long time.
Many of the general rules of single-subject lighting pertain to lighting multiple subjects. Often, each subject in the frame will have a key light on their face, and light acting as a fill, and a backlight separating them from the background. But this doesn't mean each subject needs their own set of 3 lights. With smart blocking and light positioning, one light can act as a key light for 2 or more characters, or a key light for one character and a fill light for another. A similar technique is cross-key lighting, also called back-cross lighting, where lights positioned behind the actors act as a key for one character and a backlight for the other. This is especially useful for DIY projects with multiple cameras and a limited number of lights.
Gee, I didn't realize we were making Ben-Hur.
On Elvis, cinematographer Mandy Walker took things a step further by pre-lighting her sets for 360 degrees, since she needed to work with lots of movement and carefully considered blocking for several subjects at once.
Thank you. So you better just give me a minute or give me a second. I'm back in this thing and I'm ready to set it all up.
But to ensure the lighting wasn't flat and overly generalized, she had a Best Boy hold a portable LED eye light attached to a boom pole, so that the main character would always have a glint in his eye, no matter where he's facing.
I'm gonna show you what the real Elvis is like tonight!
Lighting subjects can be just half your battle. Lighting a location can involve more complex setups that require dozens of different light sources. But they all add up to this. What mood are you trying to establish? Cinematographers usually aim for their lighting to be motivated by a location. Sometimes they'll take liberties, creating more stylized lighting. Other times, they stick more closely to reality with naturalistic lighting. Let's look at some approaches for different locations, starting with exterior day. Lighting exteriors during the day can be deceptively difficult. Usually, a cinematographer is at the whim of the sun. And not all sunlight is created equal. Light during the golden hour is much less harsh than lighting at noon. And so, pre-production for an outdoor shoot needs to be keenly aware of the time of day. For most cinematographers, shooting with the sun directly on a subject's face is generally avoided. So often, subjects will be placed with their backs to the sun, so that the light can be bounced on their faces more softly, and the sun can act as a backlight. Alternatively, on larger sets, a giant screen may be used to diffuse or block out the sun entirely to avoid overexposure, which refers to too much light hitting the camera's sensor. For more on exposure, check out our videos on the subject, linked below. Of course, the sun may not always cooperate, as cinematographer Gavin Finney explains.
I think the hardest thing is lack of predictability. I think if it's consistent, I just want consistency. If it's sunny, I want it to stay sunny. If it's cloudy, I want it to stay cloudy.
Let's look at a scene that takes place in full sunlight.
Meeting in the middle of the desert always made me nervous. It's a scary place.
On Casino, cinematographer Robert Richardson had to contend with the desert sun. At first, Richardson wanted to use the sun conventionally as a backlight. But Martin Scorsese wanted to shoot the scene using 2 cameras at once to catch improvisation, so Richardson's plan went out the window. Instead, only Nicky has a backlight, while Sam is directly in the sun.
You said I'm bringing heat on you? I gotta listen to people because of your You're ordering me out? You better get your own army, pal.
I didn't do anything. I didn't know.
According to Richardson, the result was a far more saturated visual look, pulling and using the blues of the desert sky in strong contrast to the almost white, dry lake feel of the landscape. On The Revenant, director of photography Emmanuel Lubezki used the low sun of a Canadian winter to his advantage, shooting with as much natural light as possible. To do this, he shot on digital cameras, the Arri Alexa M and XTs. This allowed more flexibility with the ever-changing light, since it could shoot at a high ISO with almost no detectable grain. For Lubezki, his lighting strategy entirely relied on the time of day. At 1 p.m. in bright sunshine, there would not be anything of any interest in terms of atmosphere. But at 4:30 p.m., when the sun disappeared behind a mountain, the same location would then look mysterious. Lubezki's digital imaging technician, or DIT, needed to constantly be updating the camera's iris settings to keep brightness continuity from shot to shot. Having little control over light on set also meant that the coloring process was more involved. Lubezki worked with Steve Scott to darken backgrounds and lighten faces in post. The Revenant cinematography shows that you don't need massive, expensive lights to combat the sun when shooting outside. If you use location and time to your advantage, the sun can do the work for you. But this isn't the case when shooting exteriors at night. When shooting outside, cinematographers are tasked with creating light that doesn't feel unnaturally bright, but also avoids underexposure from too little light reaching the camera's sensor, making the image indiscernible. Of course, night exteriors can take a variety of forms, from a dark forest to a bustling city. In a rural setting, a cinematographer will often establish a base light, a non-directional light that makes sure nothing is completely lost in black shadows. This allows colorists to have more control over shadows in post-production. To achieve moonlight, DPs will often use moon cubes, a large box filled with heavy diffusers. Or for an even larger area, a Musco light may be employed. Simulating moonlight also means giving your lights a cooler color temperature.
I want to go back there.
Moonlight tends to be around 4100 Kelvin. If a cinematographer wants certain elements in the background to be more visible, they can also use specials, smaller lights that are hidden in frame. Usually a soft light will also be applied on the subjects, but occasionally more directional equipment may be used for a more stylized look. Prey relies heavily on nighttime exteriors. To achieve a soft moonlight look, director of photography Jeff Cutter used soft boxes with 18 Skypanel 360s. The crew then hoisted the lights on 80-foot lifts to achieve a high angle. For key lights, Cutter would often use balloons, which were smaller and more mobile, but still very diffused. To get a cyan color that mimicked the moon, the color temperature on the lights was set to between 6,000 and 8,000 Kelvin. This resulted in a deep blue, which was corrected in post-production to look slightly greener. Many shots utilized firelight. Cutter augmented the natural warm glow of the fire with tungsten incandescent lights, which have a warm color temperature to match the flames. But Cutter ensured the blue moonlight didn't disappear in these shots, adding blue to smoke and shadows. But you don't have to rely on massive light rigs to pull off your nighttime shots. In The Witch, Robert Eggers and DP Jaron Blaschke opted to shoot on a digital camera Arri Alexa Plus 4x3 in order to shoot in much darker contexts and use the natural moonlight. According to Blaschke, shooting with natural light was a responsibility. The actors are all in these really period-accurate costumes, and we have sets made with traditional techniques. To then put out a kino flow would just be a betrayal. Any shadows that resulted from the technique only add to the horror. But you aren't always going to be shooting outside. Which leads us to interior day. Shooting inside usually means having more control over the light. Artificial lights can always be turned off. This means that lighting can often be more nuanced. And because the audience expects artificial lighting, a cinematographer can use practicals, lights that appear in a frame. Because of this, the quality and source of light in interior day scenes can vary drastically. From scenes that rely on window light, like this one from Her, to scenes where exterior light is barely present at all.
Mark! He's wired in. Sorry? He's wired in. Is he? Yes.
For The Whale, DP Matthew Libatique decided on the latter, lighting his interior sparsely to match the dire mood of the film and its protagonist. Libatique shot on a Sony Venice, which could shoot at low light with an ISO of 2500. This allowed him to light primarily using practical lights like lamps, which don't emit as much illumination as film lights. Using practicals also meant that Libatique was lighting from the floor, leaving much of the house in pockets of shadows.
No, without this thing. Just stand up and walk over here.
I can't really...
Shut up! Come over here.
Roger Deakins, meanwhile, has shot daytime interiors that have almost no indoor lights. In this scene from Sicario, Deakins lit the interior solely through the windows. He used T12 Fresnels to create the feeling of harsh sunlight, while 2K Blondes also provided a flat fill light to the scene.
FBI, don't move!
Smoke and dust, meanwhile, act as natural diffusers and allow Deakins to employ volumetric lighting, a technique that gives light shape, like the beams in the hallway. By lighting an interior almost completely from the outside, Deakins emphasizes that the building is abandoned and only has one use. Lighting strategies change when shooting interiors at night. Interior night lighting relies even more on artificial light, since there's no sun coming in from the windows. Interior light can take many forms, from the warm candlelight in Barry Lyndon to the pale fluorescence in Chungking Express. In this basement scene from Inglourious Bastards, there is very little outside light.
Eric, mon chéri, das sind die Freunde, auf die ich gewartet habe. Bitte gib ihm alles, was sie möchten.
Frau von Hammersmark, Ihr Wunsch ist mir Befehl.
Cinematographer Robert Richardson created a baselight by hanging tungsten bulbs from the ceiling, which were diffused with 2 layers of muslin. As the tension in the scene escalates, the lighting grows more dramatic. Richardson added Parcan top lights and backlights, which are more harsh and directional. The harsh top light increased the contrast of the shot, and the backlight further removed the principal actors from their backgrounds.
It would appear there's only one thing left for you to do.
And what would that be?
Steglitz.
Say auf Wiedersehen to your Nazi boss.
The lighting then changes once more when the shootout begins, becoming even more directional through the smoke. Through a gradual change in lighting, Richardson was able to enhance the dramatic beats of the scene. On Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick and cinematographer Larry Smith opted to use window light to create a stylized look, exaggerating the difference between interior light and moonlight by increasing their difference in color temperature. Most of the interior nighttime apartment scenes were lit with practical lights, which naturally have a warm color temperature. This orange light was contrasted with a deep blue coming in from the window. As Larry Smith explains, the blue we used was very saturated, much bluer than natural moonlight would be. But we didn't care about that. We just went for a hue that was interesting.
Dallas? It's okay. It's okay.
The blue color was obtained with open-faced clear glass arcs. These lights were also quite directional and created strong beams that were picked up by shooting on a T1.3 stop and using a Tiffen LC1 filter. Both camera elements gave the interior lighting a soft glow. Smith heightened the color contrast in his close-ups. Depending on the desired color, he would use blue Chinese lanterns, or he would dim the practicals, which made them even warmer. As Smith notes, most of the movie is at either extreme, either very rich and warm, or very blue and cold. Kubrick and Larry Smith's work on Eyes Wide Shut shows us that nighttime interiors can have very different color palettes, and it all depends on the nature of the room and the desired effect.
Bill, I have seen one or two things in my life, but never anything like this.
Of course, there are exceptions to every norm we've laid out in this video. Cinematographers prove again and again that rules are meant to be broken. Abiding by rules or not, lighting is one of the most important elements of any film. With the right lighting tools and setup, from subject to subject, to set, a shot can go from good to unforgettable. Tell us some of your favorite lighting examples in the comments below. In the description, you'll find a link to download an ebook on cinematic lighting covering everything from this two-part series. That's all for now. Until next time, remember that some lights never go out.